Good evening. It's 5:31 on Wednesday, July 11th, 2018. It's a monthly meeting of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. Could we please have a roll call?
Francis Rigberg Baker.
Here.
Carol Bradford.
Here.
Stacy Burnett. Lisa Mosley.
Here.
Daniel Larson.
Here.
Peter Resnick.
I see him.
Catalina Thomas. Samuel Bindum.
Here.
Lolita Dumas. Brianna Donald.
Here.
Thank you. Looking over tonight's agenda, are there any additions, edits, or corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve.
Is there a second? All
I
right.
second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Thank you. Looking over the minutes from our June 13th meeting, are there any additions, edits, or corrections that need to be made? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve June 13th, 2018 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Samuel. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Thank you. Public participation? Seeing none, hearing none, we are going to move on to some old business, and we welcome back our former leader, Todd. Mr. Rent, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Yes. And thank you for the opportunity to come before you again. I wanted to review the Urbana Municipal Code language, Chapter 2-119. As you remember, we provided a draft of some revisions at the last meeting and wanted to take the opportunity to collect some comments, maybe collect and address any questions that you may have about the proposed revisions, but also to talk about the next steps. And I guess I'll start with that. From this point, from the point at which we develop the language for the ordinance, then the next step would be to begin to take a look at your administrative rules, the policies and procedures for the implementation that currently exist for the implementation of the EEO contract compliance plan, and incorporate additional administrative rules for the administrative enforcement of the authorization that's provided here for minority and female-owned contractors. And so, but prior to doing that, and I hope to have that in front of you for the packet next at the next meeting, I wanted to take your comments and questions so that I can address those between now and then also, so that when I bring the administrative rules back, I'll have the responses and also the administrative rules for your review. So we did an overview of the changes last time, and I guess my question to you is whether or not there are any comments or questions that you have, any concerns about the language as drafted. Maybe I can get the ball rolling a little bit? Great. So if everyone looks at page, well, we don't have the pages numbered, but you go down to, if you flip it open to the second page. Oh, you don't have the actual draft in front of you. I should have done that. I should have distributed them. You know what we can do? Yes, it's online. Yes, ma'am. So, and maybe I'll just talk about it at this point. So one of the things that's important to do in this type of language is try to define out exactly what you mean by participation by a subcontractor. And that's, I guess, the reason for that is born of years of experience of having various contractors who may not have necessarily played a substantial or significant role in the actual work, the work that's projected under the contract, but still receiving and counting as a qualifying minority or female-owned business for the purposes of qualifying for reaching the goal that's been set by the municipality. So in the section that I plan to review, and we can review this next time also, it basically sets forth exactly what are those participation expectations and what the criteria are for participation. One of the comments that I received in the interim between last month and this month was from Patrick Thompson with VEA Inc. And he questioned, there are certain criteria or levels for participation for individuals who are providing materials and supplies. So when you're providing services, it's a little more straightforward. But if you're providing materials and supplies, then you could be someone who is the manufacturer of those materials. You could be someone who is a dealer, a regular dealer of those materials. You could be someone who is neither a manufacturer nor a regular dealer. And the question is, should all of those types of interactions or subcontractors, should all of those count equally? And the language that was presented assumes that they should not be. And so, for instance, if you're the manufacturer, you receive 100, then the subcontractor or the contractor would receive basically a credit of 100% towards your participation. However, if you are a regular dealer of the goods, of the supplies, then there's a discount for that, and you only receive about 60% for the participation of that subcontractor towards the goal, right? Mm-hmm. In the end, in number 3 and D3, once you have a chance to review it, and I'd love to get your comments on that, there was some concern expressed that if an individual is neither, or a subcontractor is neither a manufacturer nor a regular dealer, they could still potentially, under this language, qualify as a minority business or a minority contractor or a female-owned contractor, but you would only receive, or the prime would only receive 5% credit for the participation of that individual. And essentially, if you're neither a regular dealer nor a manufacturer, then essentially that role is more of a pass-through role. And the question is whether or not even 5% should be afforded for that type of pass-through role. And so one of the things that was suggested is that we remove that particular language, and along with providing administrative rules that give very clear guidelines and very specific criteria and guidelines for what constitutes a regular dealer, for what constitutes a manufacturer. And so those are the types of things, and the reason I brought that up is we don't have to have this discussion tonight, but once we do have the discussion in earnest, I think those are the types of things that we want to review very carefully, and that it would be good to have your participation on. And thank you, Monique. So the language that I was referring to is going to be on the second page. At least it's going to start on the second page under C1, and then it's A through D, where it starts. And specifically, if you look under C, then 1, and then 2, under that it begins to say the following criteria will be used in determining how the NWBE participation counts towards subcontracting goals. And so you see there the breakdown. Under D, that's where you're discussing the breakdown for materials and supplies towards the MWBE goals. So again, we don't have to specifically do the review today. However, I would, if possible, I think it would be great if we could do it at the next meeting, along with a review of the administrative rules. Sir.
So and I need to get my head back around this, the 100%, 60%, 5%, is that toward the 51% ownership, or what is
No,
it?
no,
It's
I'm
toward
sorry.
points on a bid?
No, it's towards whatever goal is set for that. So if there's a 20% minority and female-owned participation goal for the contract, and you have someone who's coming, and let's just say that they're helping you reach half of that. If they're seen as fully participating, right, and fully qualifying. However, I'm sorry, if they are only a regular dealer as opposed to a manufacturer and it's for supplies, then you only count 60% of that 10%.
And
As you're going to the 20%.
And the
goal.
percentages of money in the contract?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. There was probably a much easier way to explain that.
Fran?
Oh, thank you. I'm a little confused by the way D3 is stated, that it's a negative. Is that a common practice to state a requirement that what someone isn't rather than what someone is?
Well, yeah, I think, and this is somewhere where I think the rules can help, because the rules are going to set forth what a regular dealer is and what a manufacturer is. Now, there are probably there may be other types of participation that don't fit into these categories, but I guess in the experience of the individuals who have drafted these rules, generally you have either the regular dealer, the manufacturer, or the other. And there are so many different categories that they call themselves, that there are so many ways to refer to that type of transaction that I think they just found it easier to define it by its exclusion rather than positively.
It might be helpful, at least as far as I'm concerned, to have a couple of examples so I know. I get the idea that it's other, but I'm not clear what that would be in this situation.
Peter?
So the one thing that concerns me about this section is, let's say we're putting out a bid for printing up some booklets of some sort. And the printer in question is going to go and buy the paper from someone. And we're saying that if they buy the paper from International Paper, the manufacturer of the paper, or they buy it from Hammerhill, or whatever, paper manufacturer there is, they get 100%. But if they buy it from the local guy who's selling
yeah.
paper, he's only a dealer, so they only get 60% credit for buying the paper from a local dealer who's minority owned, rather than
No,
a large
okay,
business,
yeah,
which
and-
might be minority owned.
Right, and see, that's the thing. They would only get credit if the manufacturer that they're purchasing it from is either if they qualify as a minority-owned or female-owned or whatever disadvantaged business enterprise that we have. So they would have to ultimately disclose that chain of, we will know if the prime is not a manufacturer of the good, and if they're just getting those supplies in.
I guess my question is, why does, generally speaking, vendors don't go directly to manufacturers for a whole host of products.
Absolutely.
They go to dealers.
Right.
Why are we only counting dealers for loads of products that you would never go to the manufacturer for as only 60%, when maybe that's a large portion of the contract itself, is the materials?
Right, but I think it's only in comparison, it's 60% in comparison to a minority contractor or a minority sub that may actually be the manufacturer. And where you have that minority sub that is a manufacturer of the good, we want to provide a higher percentage of participation award for that individual, as opposed to someone who is a regular dealer, so they're a wholesaler or whatever, but they're not actually manufacturing and that again is just promoting sort of the participation and the capacity building for those businesses.
How does this apply to foreign, when there's a foreign corporation or provider involved? I mean, they get the paper from China, so what happens? How does that fit into this scheme?
Right. Well, and that's a very good question, and we can provide a more thorough answer. But I would imagine the question would go down to whether or not that supplier is considered to be a minority under the administrative rules that are produced. But that's an excellent question.
Carol?
Question. I'm just trying to make sure I got a clear understanding of this. The whole goal is to provide incentive for them to do business with the MWBE, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's why you have the different percentages towards that 20%. Because I guess in my mind, a manufacturer would probably have more employees than, I don't know, I guess I'm wondering what we're looking at. Is it just strictly MWBE and whether or not it's that, and then depending on if it's a manufacturer, dealer, that determines the percentage?
Right. I think, so think of it in terms of you get people who provide services and then people who provide supplies, who are vendors who provide supplies. For services, for the most part, it's very straightforward, and those services, it's hard to, in some way, create a subterfuge or a pretext to where someone else is performing the service, because you can always check on the site and see that the people the company that said that they were going to be performing the service, the minority or female-owned company that said they were going to be performing the service, is performing the service. However, I think over the years, the entities and the public entities that have been enforcing these policies have seen that it's much harder to get a handle on and to really pin down the participation when it has to do with manufactured goods and suppliers. And so they've sort of created this tiered system for those suppliers, and in order to really suss out what constitutes participation. But it also, when you set forward those rules, then it also tells people that we are going to be auditing to check to see exactly what role the minority subcontractor or female-owned subcontractor is playing in the provision of these supplies. But also, you had mentioned the workforces. I should stress again, this has to do with ownership of the subcontractor, or of the subcontracting entity. Someone could qualify as long as they were truly the genuine owner of the subcontracting entity and be a minority owner, but have all non-minority staff working for them. So this is a piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is what you all are already
Right,
doing,
what we're already
which is
looking at.
yeah. And so that really speaks to the workforce more than this. This speaks to capacity building and building the economic viability of minority-owned and female-owned businesses.
Okay, that's what I was trying to differentiate from, because we're already looking at workforce, so this is just an additional component of trying to make sure some of these minority-owned businesses get more
Right.
business.
Now, I also think it's a safe assumption to say that because you would presume that the historical biases that may exist against minorities and females would not be as prevalent if the businesses are owned by minorities and females, that may have a positive impact on the overall workforce and the overall employment. I think that that's a reasonable presumption. However, that's not necessarily the impetus behind it, behind subcontracting goals.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but.
No, that,
Any other questions for Todd? One quick one. Who is, is it the expectation that our rules or our procedures would define the different weightings for MWBE participation, or and that versus workforce makeup? Like, we're going to come up with either a set of formulas we're going to pass on to department heads, or how exactly do you envision the end result?
That's a great question. So ultimately, the way it's structured, the mayor will set the goal. If it is as written here, the mayor will set the subcontracting goal, or the participation goals. Then it will be up to the commission to set the workforce participation goals, which you already do, but also to review the actual documentation that's presented to determine whether or not there's been compliance with the participation goals, and more specifically, whether or not the contractors have made, the prime contractors have made good faith efforts, have satisfied the good faith efforts requirements in order to qualify as a responsible bidder for the purpose of the contracts. And so it's going to be those administrative rules that are, at least I believe, the administrative rules that are created here that will guide that process. And whereas you may not be making the first hand, the rules will guide the process, and then I would imagine in many cases you would hear appeals for non-compliance, which is exactly the same as what you would do for the workforce statistics, the workforce utilization.
So the difference here is with the workforce utilization, we've pretty much made up the numbers that we're going to consider, you know, too high, too low, what percentage is going to call into question. Actually, it's relative. Those numbers, when we're going to say something's wrong here, are generally subjective to the extent that we sort of look for patterns, right? We're not, we're using objective data, but we're saying, well, this one grew, this company grew and the numbers went down, or this company shrank and the numbers went up. And we introduce all sorts of information. This company is located in a state where the diversity is very low in the first place, and maybe that's the problem. If the numbers for the map fee stuff are going to be set by the mayor, I would be inclined to, at least in the ordinance, have something about the mayor in consultation with the HRC. You know, you always write laws for when the evil mayor comes along, or when Mayor Marland completely loses her mind and things go completely off the rails.
That will never happen.
And that will never happen until it, you know, until we get the next mayor who does turn loopy at some point. And so having some way to at least publicly admonish the crazy mayor who comes and consults with us and say, you didn't, 1% is not a good number. And perhaps you should rethink that, I think is worth at least putting somewhere in the ordinance.
I will make that note.
Sorry, that brought up one more question for
Sure.
me. And forgive me, when we're looking at workforce compliance, and let's say it's a company that doesn't meet the percentage we've set for how many minorities they have represented in their employ, but then they have a subcontractor who is an MWBE. How does that all jive?
Yeah, okay.
Is that going to be more subjective on our part? Is it going to be more?
I think there are a couple of different ways you could look at it. You could look at both of the qualifying criteria as independent, right? You have one track here that you have to qualify for, and the other track here that you have to qualify for. Or, and I know we talked about this probably way back in 2014, is you could look at the subcontracting goal and make sure that that's met. But then also, if there is a significant, or you could take that workforce and permit the contractor, the prime contractor, to, in a sense, add or incorporate the minorities, our minority or female-owned subcontractors' workforce into their own, and to look at all of the numbers, to look at it from a holistic standpoint in terms of the project as a whole. And in a sense, you're giving, I don't want this to sound pejorative, but you're giving the, you're double dipping. You're allowing the prime to double dip in a sense, but in a sense, it's, again, to get towards, to recognize those efforts, and in a sense, you're double recognizing the efforts, but I think that that's certainly something that you could consider doing.
So essentially, when you said earlier about, is this going to be something where it's just a pass-through? So on this particular project that I'm bidding on, that you're going to give me a 2-year, you know, whatever on, I actually have secured an MWBE. So even though my own workforce doesn't quite cut the mustard, because I have this MWBE, depending on what they're supplying and how big of a part they're playing, I could be awarded that for that one particular project.
I think if the commission wanted to do that, you could amend your rules to basically incorporate language in the workforce utilization portion of the rules that basically says that contractors, prime contractors, would be permitted to incorporate or to count the other workforce, whatever subcontracting workforce, towards their utilization goal.
And that one doesn't even necessarily need to be MWBE, right? I mean, you could have a white male-owned business, but if you are subcontracting
Absolutely.
to that white male-owned business who happens to hire all black females, and there's hundreds of them, you get points, or you get, you get numbers toward your utilization. Like, okay, you're making a conscious effort to include everybody, even if it's not you're hiring them directly, you're subcontracting to them.
So I think it's going to be really important to be as clear as possible, because you could have someone say, well, you guys approved me for that one job 2 years ago, why are you turning me down now? And, you know, we're saying, well, on that job 2 years ago, you had a couple of different subcontractors that were minority or woman-owned business, and that's why. So just that kind of stuff is what's going through my head.
Yeah, Fran?
I think we should be careful not to conflate these two ways of looking at it. I mean, it's one thing to incorporate, to look at the workforce overall, including the subcontractor. It's another to have some kind of function of their having a minority or female-owned business. I mean, you know, those are two different things. And I prefer the former, the thing that Pete said. It makes more sense. You're not confusing the two criteria.
And so leaning more toward Todd's description of 2 tracks. You do women minority-owned as one set of qualifications, and maybe you subcontract to minority and women-owned, and that helps in that track, but workforce is a separate track, and you count those
Well,
differently.
if it's minority or female-owned, you get one extra person.
Right.
Well, and the other thing to consider, one other complicating factor, is that the minority or female-owned subcontractors are not going to be the only subcontractors on the job. And so, yeah, so do you want to incorporate, do you want to pull in
Everybody.
all of those towards, which may or not water it down, but will change the statistics, or do you just look at the minority and female-owned? Those are all things that you all can discuss.
So any further comments for Todd right now? What are your next steps?
My next steps will be to come back before you at the next meeting, apparently in September, and provide administrative rules prior to that meeting so that you have a good opportunity to get well acquainted with them, and then actually have a more extended discussion on the authorization language and the administrative rules.
So if I understand correctly, we're going to sort of nail down at least some set of administrative rules before this even goes to city council?
Well, I think it would be helpful at the very minimum to have at least a draft of those so that they can see how, because,
How we would implement
yeah,
the law.
the authorization language in and of itself raises tons of operational questions. And so to at least have at least some outline of how that will look, I think will be helpful, but also to have the record of the conversations that are occurring about this amongst and between and amongst you all as the commission that is most closely aligned with these questions, I think will be very helpful as they deliberate on the question of authorization. So they'll deliberate on the authorization. You all will ultimately deliberate on your administrative rules, if that makes sense.
All right, I think that sounds like the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Have a good afternoon, evening.
All right. And Dan had to leave early, so I'm stepping in to chair. So moving on to item 6, new business. We have no new business listed. So item 7, staff report. Vasilia, would you like to do EEO or HRO activity first?
Let's start with EEO, and let's talk about everything except A&R Mechanical.
All right. Does someone have any comments, or does someone want to just make a motion, or more than one motion, for purposes of discussion or otherwise?
I'll do that. I move that we approve the recommendations of the Human Relations Officer as follows. Roanoke Concrete Products Company, 1 year. ESI Consultants, 2 years. Davis Houck Mechanical Incorporated, 6 months. I should omit this one. Midwest Engineering and Testing, 2 years. J.H. Moore Incorporated, 2 years. And Co-Equipment, 2 years.
Okay, do we have a second? So we have a motion by Fran, second by Lisa. Discussion. Anybody have comments or concerns about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those 6?
No, I agree with the staff recommendations, just looking at, like, most of those seem to fit the numbers. So I have no concerns with those.
Anybody else? Hold the finger if you want me to hold on for a second. Okay.
I'm just a little bit curious about Midwest Engineering.
Turn on your mic if you would.
Just a little bit curious about Midwest Engineering and Testing. Am I reading this correctly, that they have increased staffing
By 7.
by 7? Okay. And it looks like,
They increased a female.
and then when I'm
lost
looking at the
Latinos.
LTN column, it looks like it went from 2 to 0.
Right, so lost 2 Latino employees, gained 1 female employee,
Lost an Asian.
lost
an
1
Asian.
Asian employee, kept the same number of African-American employees, but of course, because the total numbers
So
of,
low, yeah.
the total number went up, the percentage went down.
They don't have that sheet. Mr. Chair?
Yes?
The logic behind the 2-year recommendation is the fact that the project for Urbana has a total of 13 employees, and all 3 of the minorities are with that project.
That's good to know.
That's great to know. Okay.
Any other questions on the recommendations? So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that carries. So, Vasilia, would you like to tell us why A&R Mechanical does not have a recommendation?
Well, because I decided that that final decision should be left up to the commission this evening. I think you have before you a number of other sheets that is reflective of A&R Mechanical, and one of which is an email that I received this afternoon from one of the managers of A&R Mechanical explaining why their minority representation or diversity numbers are kind of dismal at best. So I'll give you an opportunity to read that.
And just as a reminder for the commission, our number of employees normally that would be the low mark for, we would not consider it, is 15.
Yes.
And so in this case, for officials and managers and professionals at A&R, they have, I count, 23, 6 of whom are female, none of whom are minority. And those would not be union employees,
That's
as
correct.
referred to in the letter. The 90, and the office and clerical, so that's another 2, so 25. The craft workers and the laborers, I take it, are the union employees?
So almost 100. And this is a company that is housed right here in Urbana, correct? As I look at their paperwork. So we know their workforce.
Right. And we know that of the workforce that they directly hire, they've got 0% minority representation of the 25 that they are hiring directly.
Yeah, I don't think the numbers are very good.
I think when we've had similar instances like this, we've done possibly a year with a 6-month review.
And I believe we've done that.
Yeah, if we take a look at, they got certified last time for 6 months.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So by
back
this
last year, which I think is why this is being brought to us.
And we also have previously discussed that realistically, what can be done in 6 months.
Right. Now,
Do we know what?
when was the last time, A&R came to speak to us at some point. How long ago was that?
It's about a year.
Was that during Alex's tenure, maybe?
It must have been, yeah.
It's about
So a year ago or so?
Yeah.
So,
They run
and
a huge book.
And let's take a look at,
So at some point, we did a letter, they came and visited with us.
they said the
and-
main problem is we
And they're
use
still
these
blaming the
unions.
unions.
They haven't given us an account for the non-union employees.
Right.
Now, one thing that we have not looked at, since we have Section 2119 in front of us, there is the requirement that they agree not to employ or otherwise use the services of any labor organization or employee thereof until such labor organization first submits to the chairperson of the Human Relations Commission a written commitment to the rest of the provisions. So, have we ever gotten workforce statistics from any of the unions that are being utilized by these folks?
No, we have not.
Because that's at least one possible lever to pull, but I think, you know, we have the two separate issues. We have what do we do about their union issue, and what do we do about the rest of their workforce?
Well, one of the things that I'm thinking about is the point that was just made that they have a total of about 18, 19 non-union employees. They're not skilled crafts.
Well, I count 25 if you can count the office and clerical
Yes.
and professionals, too.
Yes. So my question that comes to mind is, in the last 12 months, how many of these positions have been available to fill of the 2025?
Right.
And what were their good faith efforts in trying to fill these positions?
Now, is this turnover report that we've got in front of us theirs? And they're claiming that they've had no turnover except they have hired an additional
Yeah.
female clerical worker. Everybody else, there is no turnover. Now, the craft workers, laborers, they're supposedly utilizing the same 111 people, give or take, because there's been no turnover, or there's been minimal turnover in those categories, 4 and 14.
103.
I'm sorry.
Those are new
No,
hires.
okay, yeah, separated two operatives, 3 unskilled laborers.
So, yeah, that's a huge jump from 27 in 2017 employees to 130. Is this a smaller company within a bigger company? When you were talking about the speaker, was this F&S? Illini F&S?
Oh, no, well, no, we had
Because I
INR
remember
separately,
us
yeah.
asking for that. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, FNS, and yeah, we had
Let's not go
a
down that
similar
road, but
conversation.
That's a huge
But
increase.
the 27 looks an awful lot like the officials, professionals, and clerical, that this is maybe the seasonal problem in their numbers. And so maybe what we have is 2 independent things going on.
Yeah,
We have their union labor that comes and goes, and then we have their permanent labor, which is the 25 or so.
The union, it's almost like a subcontract. So, you know, that's what we're looking at. And I notice also in this wording of the new section we're looking at, this section shall not, I don't know where it is, but it says, this section shall not be applicable to the following contracts, and one of them is collective bargaining contracts. And so unions are sometimes treated a little differently. I don't think that should diminish our interest in seeing increased diversity one bit.
So,
Do we know what?
I have not heard from the floor anyone who is interested in moving that we approve them for any period of time. Do staff have any recommendation of what next steps would be if we don't approve them?
I think we would have to invite them to a meeting to help further explain their numbers. And I guess at this point, the bottom line question is, does the commission feel that they're at that point where they would not approve and until further explanation is provided?
Fran?
I have a question. Who grants the contracts? And what part of the city government grants the contracts?
Well, this particular vendor is Public Works.
Okay. Then they don't concern themselves with the things we look at. They're just looking at the costs involved and the so forth.
Pretty much in terms of when they're considering bids.
Yes.
Yes.
They don't look at this. Okay, that's our
I mean,
job.
they're effectively sending it to us to look at.
Right, okay.
We are that review.
But perhaps it would be of interest to them that we're considering this.
I am quite sure that staff will make them aware that we are doing this. So what I'm hearing around the table is we would like more information. We understand the information, I think, about the labor union. I think what we'd want to hear from them is which labor unions they're using specifically, because we might take that up separately. But then we would like further explanation about their officials, professionals, managers, and clerical workforce, which we take it are non-union, and to get some further information about that, at least at first written, and if we need to bring them in for a meeting at some point, we will.
I
Yeah,
would like
Lisa.
to add one more question, and I'd like an explanation on how it went from 27 to 130. Is that seasonal? That would make sense. If it is, that goes back to Carol's question about, was 6 months enough? Those kinds of things would help us.
Well, we're not really seeing any significant change one way or the other in the 6 months.
Well,
It's pretty
yeah,
stagnant.
other than a
Uh-huh.
letter, but
Right.
Yeah, I think we have some more questions.
So let me make sure that I'm clear. Do we want to invite them in for our next meeting to offer further clarification?
How much time do we have in this situation before their contract?
Right, do we know what
Without-
contract this is for?
They're expired.
Oh,
Oh.
they are working for us, and they have an expired certification, effectively. They've got ongoing contracts with the city.
That's a question that I'm not clear on yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Either way,
Mm-hmm.
we need to get to
Time
this
is-
forthwith.
Yeah. And has any efforts or any information been provided over the past year in terms of progress or any efforts that have been made?
They had a 6-month approval that I understand ended in October.
Okay.
And so they're just coming back around requesting approval and certification.
Without any documentation or evidence in terms of meeting or making.
Except for the
improvement?
letter.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Do we want to ask them in? Do we want to give them a chance to give us some written stuff first, and then, because we're not meeting in August, correct?
That is correct.
So we could at least potentially review that material if they send additional material between now and then, and put them on the invite list for the September meeting, and we can always say, oh, you've sent us enough written material, let's go ahead and cancel. We're going to make our decision based on that, something like that.
Okay.
Does that
And can
work?
they specifically, the Champaign-Urbana Initiative for Labor Diversity, I just want to know exactly what they've done with them. Because I know a little bit about that, so I'm just curious.
Okay.
as to-
Would it help if you guys put together your questions that you want me to submit to them? Send it via email either to Monique or to myself, and have it to us by next Friday? And then we could put together a letter, a comprehensive letter that we'll send out to them requesting additional information before any further certifications or approvals for certifications is done.
Right. We definitely, I've so far heard, we want numbers on who is union, how many of the numbers that they provided us are union versus how many are regular employees. We want to find out which unions are involved. We want to find out the seasonal nature of, the numbers last year to this. And, I'm sorry, Carol, what was your last one? My brain ran out of space.
They just said they've been
Oh,
doing
and right,
various
the,
grassroots efforts.
What are those?
what are the efforts?
Another thing is, I think, have they ever shown us have they ever tried to deal with the union directly? By sending letters or by sitting down with the leaders and what kind of response they've gotten?
Right.
So more or less kind of what has been the good faith efforts since the last renewal.
Right. I think if you title the section with the list of things, and if we want to add to that list, get them to Vasilia or to Monique by next Friday, she can add to that list, but basically titling it, we are interested in what good faith efforts you've taken, and here are the list of specific questions we've got regarding that.
Yes.
All right. I think we will get you a couple more questions, and if you haven't heard from us by next Friday, then go ahead and ship.
Okay.
All right.
You want to pass this around?
I love a plan. All right,
No.
moving on.
So,
Oh, yes.
so right now, we are not approving them.
Correct.
Right, we have not made any claim that they are in violation yet. We are just simply saying we need more information.
Gotcha.
All right, so that is the end of EEO workforce statistics, HRO activity report.
Okay, which is being passed around. And basically, it's just kind of a summary of where I left off from last month. The vehicle for hire ordinance I've worked with finance since our last meeting, and we're scheduled to go before the city council on Monday, July 23rd. And it's for their approval. And I will get you the final language for that ordinance, the section that specifically deals with the appeal as soon as it's completed, which is, I'm guessing, will be sometime next week.
And then we're going to, assuming we are then on the hook for being the appeals board or whatever we're going to call ourselves for
That
this.
is correct.
We're going to have to come up with a set of procedures.
We're going to have to work on procedures and rules.
All
Yes.
right.
And just, I talked with Beth Beatty today, and I asked her if she have a feel of when we could have our first appeal, and she is anticipating maybe around November. So we have a little time, but in my perfect world, I'd like to have something in terms of a draft of the rules and the procedures by the time we go before council. Although council does not have to adopt our rules and procedures, I'm anticipating that there may be some questions on structure and order. We just had Todd here discussing the second one, the amendments for the procurement policy. Tomorrow, Todd and I will be meeting with Aaron Ammons and Patrick to discuss and get additional feedback from them in terms of the changes in this ordinance. And one of the steps that we're planning on taking is that we want to invite in other contractors to get their feedback and input as we move along with this process as well. The community awareness campaign, there was an event on June 23rd, Jetty Roads, where the city had a table, and we had a number of representatives from various departments where we were handing out information. And one of the things that we put together real fast is what you have in front of you is just a very general information card about the commission itself and what your role is. So if you guys need any extra ones that you can hand out to folks, you feel free to let Monique know, and she can take care of you.
Do we have an electronic version of this as well? That would be great to have. Or is it up on the website? That would be great to have on the website. Then we can email it around to people.
But we're also going to continue to try to promote those resources that's in our community as it relates to technology training and opportunities. One of the things I am talking to our marketing director is about getting companies in that can film like 2 or 3 minute, did you know that at Parkland we have blah, 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 did you know, that kind of thing. Samuel, did you have a question? No. Oh, okay. Okay. And the work continues in terms of the police community relations. Preston may have some announcements about that. I'm not sure if it's premature at this point. So if not, you'll be getting an email or something that will advise you of what the next steps will be in terms of this endeavor. We're working on the MLK program. We have a conference call scheduled for tomorrow, and we are trying desperately to nail down a keynote speaker and decide what the entertainment factor is going to be. It will be at the Vineyard again, and I think we've made a small change, but I think it'll be a significant change where we're going to have the reception at the beginning of the program rather than at the end. So the reception will be first and then the program.
Okay.
And then number 6, I just mentioned that we do need to get those procedures written, and anyone who has any extra time on their hands is welcome to give me a call. But I'll try to put together some type of draft and send it out to you, get your feedback, and answer any questions that you might have, so that by the 23rd of this month, we will have at least a skeleton kind of formats laid out for the council. And there is no meeting in August. And in September, I had invited our new city administrator to come to a meet and greet. And I thought we could have that from 5 until 5:45, and the meeting actually start at 5:45.
That sounds great.
And finally, I want you guys to start thinking about what kind of community education program do you want to sponsor for in the upcoming fiscal year?
Great. Any questions for Vasilia on the activity report? Any changes to the budget?
Yes.
Oh, we love news.
So the change to the budget, the structure has changed. So the way that we have been giving information as far as the budget is concerned with how much we've spent and how much we have left over, we won't do that any longer. So what we will give you is what we've spent. The structure has changed, so we have everything lined out and grouped up a little bit different. So I'm not able to give you what the bottom line is because it is not just HRC, it's CPRB, it's our, all of that. So we still have roughly the same amount that we had last year, last fiscal year. So I don't see that there would be a interruption or a stop in anything that HRC wanted to do in this fiscal year. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that?
Nope, that sounds fine. All right. I don't know, I snuck in late. We have our student representative here, which is nice to see. Hello.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to report for this month, or?
No.
And we are happy to have you come in, and if there's something going on, let us know.
Okay.
All right. Yes, Preston, did you have something for the staff report?
Yeah, I won't be long. Well, more announcements. We have that ready.
We can move on to item 8, announcements.
All right, you got me?
Yes.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Okay, so to kind of piggyback on what Vasilia was talking about, first and foremost, the last time we met, we spoke about the meeting that we was going to have on the 28th at the Douglas Library that Vasilia facilitated and did a wonderful job. We want to give her credit for that. We had at least 77 citizens, like Champaign-Urbana citizens, actually a couple from Danville, I believe, and we also had staff there. So that was well attended, well ran, and I believe we got a lot accomplished. So coming up, something else that the city's involved in, where the Human Relations Department is heavily involved in, July 19th, which is coming up at Prairie Park. They have a play day where we'll be out there. The Urbana police officers will be out there and kind of engaging with the kids, not just standing by the car giving out stickers, but doing more engagement type stuff. So that's coming up on the 19th at Prairie Park. If you don't know where that is, it's on Washington, just east of Maine.
What time?
Oh, I'm sorry. From 5:30 to 7. July 19th, Prairie Park. All right. So another thing we do have coming up, something that Vasilia just spoke about, we're going to have another community meeting on August 1st at the Civic Center again, like the one we had in January. This one is, the last one the police did not come to. This one the police will be here. So it'll be a community police discussion at the Civic Center on August 1st. We'll have light refreshments at 5:30. The meeting will start at 6. Lastly, what I have is we're also involved in the Expungement Summit, like we've been over the past several years. I believe when the structure was different in the financing, you guys voted to give them $150 donation towards. I believe we are going to give them $150 again this year. It's just the structure's different, so you guys will be included in that as far as sponsors of that. That actual date is, I got to look at my pictures because I didn't print nothing out. I got it. So the actual expungement date is October 6th. It's at Stone Creek Church again. It's from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. The registration is between July 2nd, which has already started, through July 27th of this month. The Amnesty Week, you guys familiar with what the Amnesty Week was? I'll explain it anyway. Okay. So the Amnesty Week, what they do is one-time amnesty for 1 week from September 10th through the 14th. What they do is if people have court fines and fees that are in collections, the collection fee and the late fee is waived during that week. So your fines is just your fine. So you don't have all that extra that, I think it's like 30% is what gets added on, which helps a lot of people pay it down. So they have to contact the circuit clerk's office between September 10th and 14th if they want to try to get these fines paid off during that amnesty week. Are there any questions about anything I advised? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Preston. Any other announcements from commissioners or otherwise? All set? All right. Well, with that, we are adjourned. We will see you all in September. August is canceled. Everybody do. Thank you.